Welcome to the Whiskey Chasers, where we talk about our passion for whiskey and its history, either amongst ourselves or while interviewing distilleries, all while enjoying a glass. I'm Steve.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Chris.
Please enjoy responsibly while enjoying this week's episode of the Whiskey Chasers.
We've got a special guest on today. We've got Bobby from Barrel Blinds. Welcome, Bobby.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
So how did Blind Barrels get started?
So Blind Barrels got started. This was really a COVID baby. My buddy was doing blinds during, while we were all isolated and quarantined, and you can only put up so many accent walls and install so many bidets, and took all the toilet paper from Costco. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
And people running out with all the toilet paper. Like, what? And my wife works at a big financial firm, and one of the guys there was setting up just some blinds to kind of, hey, let's all jump on a Zoom. We'll taste some whiskey. It'll be cool. Just kind of this idea. And I had never done it with whiskey before. I'd done it with wine plenty of times. I'd never really done a blind anything with whiskey. And I don't think I ever really thought of whiskey as being nuanced, or diverse or interesting. It was always something I drank, or, I was a Jack and Coke guy in my 20s, and after the first tasting, I was like, dude, this feels like a business. I don't know, there's something special about this. And he's like, yeah, okay. I said, I'm going to go figure this out. Now, this is just a live pro tip. If you ever need legal assistance, you can generally get a free hour-long consultation with an attorney because they're trying to get you to hire them, okay? And you get a lot of information. So I called an ABC alcohol beverage control attorney, and I had an hour with him. It lasted 7 minutes. And I said, here's what I'm going to do. I get whiskey. I'm going to put a bottle on. I send it out to everybody. He's like, there's 7 federal laws that you're going to break if you do that. And I'm like, oh, okay. My buddy did it, but he's like, yeah, well, you're pouring samples to friends. That's kind of different. Did he drop them off? Well, yeah. You didn't ship it? No. Okay. So then I did 16 more free hour-long consultations with different ABC. I just kept calling people. And yeah, some of them really short. A couple of them really gave some interesting ideas of some problems that were solved. And then I kind of pieced together all these different elements. I called one of the attorneys that I liked. I said, what if we do it this way? She said, yes. So went out and raised, not a ton of money, but enough money to kind of really give us a shot at, building the site, creating the packaging, custom bottles, getting a location to get some licenses, all that stuff. And we really did that all through 2021. We then came up with a better way to do what we're doing legally. All 3 tiers have to be involved. You guys know about the 3-tier system, right? Prohibition ended. The people that make it have to give it to a wholesaler or distributor, and then the retailer can buy it and give it to a consumer. And so we need to make sure that we can't be in all those tiers, but I can manipulate and work with all the people so we can make it work. And then we launched in 2022, a lot of grassroots, didn't really have a marketing budget, and, got a couple hundred people, which was great. And then had a local radio DJ really get the word out. He's the number one, Southern California FM radio DJ, and became a close friend. And that really helped us grow within California in the area. And then we really kind of started thinking about marketing partnerships and expanding. And yeah, now we've got over 5,000 members in 44 states.
Wow. It really took off.
Yeah. It took 4 years, so you're just growing about 28% a quarter.
So and you kind of stuck with it then, huh? Did you do this full time, or was it like a slow transition, or?
That's a great question. It's funny. So my main bread and butter over the years has been, I've made documentaries. I've done a lot of film projects. I'm a screenwriter by trade. But while those are all technically risky ventures as well, but I've been the number one test prep guru for SAT, ACT, graduate test prep, college application essay storytelling in Southern California for the last 20 years. And so, it's good money. It's a flexible schedule, allows me to take other risks. You can't really go out and take risks. You can't be creative and desperate at the same time. Those two things can't really coexist, because at the end of the day, people invest in ideas, but they really invest in people. And if you're like, oh, Gil from The Simpsons, Gil's got to get a sale, he's got to get it done. You're Jack Lemmon and Glengarry Glenn Ross. That desperation is very palpable. And so that's been my main bread and butter. And so starting this has been a full-time job. So I was a college athlete, did 80 hours of football. And balance that with being in both the business school and the film school at USC. So that, I think, trial by fire, doing that for 5 years, does give you a certain work ethic and efficiency. And so And the reality is, if you're breathing life into an idea, whether it's a film or a concept or a product or a company, there's just an energy behind it, and that you don't feel like you're working, right? And yeah, sometimes I am doing 60, 80, 100 hours in the blind barrels. And the reality is you can't really take a draw from that because you need to scale, you need to grow. So you bring on more people and make profit. Well, if you don't put that into marketing to get more people and more packaging and more bottles and more whiskey and all that other stuff. So that's where like scaling is really difficult. If you ever watch like Shark Tank, and it's like, I quit my job to do this, but I got to pay my mortgage, right? And so they can't grow. Or some guys like, well, I'm still working my job. And they're like, well, then you're not committed. And I'm like, well, which one is it, right? And so I basically told our investors, I said, until we hit 2,500 members, I'm not going to take a draw from the company. And then I actually technically didn't do it until we hit 5,000. So I did that because I wanted to alleviate the stresses and how do you grow without taking on debt. So yeah, it's been full time, and it's funny because people are like, "Oh, you're still helping kids get into college?" I'm like, yeah, well, I'm expensive, and so I don't have to do too much of it. So it's really good money. So there's that. There's bougie people out here in Westlake that want to get their kids into Stanford, and Bobby's not going to do that, but Robert will. So there's kind of a brand element to that. And yeah, I got a beard. I'm gonna be in shorts and flip flops. It's gonna be standard, but I do like doing it. I like mentoring and motivating these kids and getting to play a pivotal role in the catalyst for the rest of their life. So I really do enjoy that. But it gives me that freedom to build a team with this company and continue to let it grow, and get some key people on here that can take over some of the things that were burdening me. So but yeah, it's always been full time. Some people are like, you're still doing that? I'm like, so they think that this company is a hobby when it's not.
Nice. Has your opinion of whiskey changed then? Now that you've been into all of this, that it's not just it has some nuance to it. Have you gotten into the tasting end of the whiskey part of it, or are you mainly just the business end?
Oh, I mean, the first tasting that my buddy did, the blind, he said, I instantly knew just how interesting and awesome it was. And so, you gotta understand, he was also being very generous, where he was putting like an old Fitz, like dusty, that he got for $60 back in like 2004. That's now worth like $800, and was charging it. Oh, I paid 60, and there's 25-ounce pours, and these are all 50 mLs, and I'm like, like he's doing the math, so he's dividing that 60 by 25 and charging you like 240, essentially for an ounce of unbelievable whiskey. So we were all very spoiled in that period because that super generous. But yeah, no, I get it. Some people are like, well, doesn't whiskey just taste like whiskey? And it's like, well, then you haven't noticed, everyone thinks all ryes are spicy or that all bourbons are sweet. And most bourbons are sweet, but I mean, ryes can be floral and they can be fruity. And, tasting everything blind, you don't always know if something, even not all single malts are super obvious because not all single malts are smoky. And we just had a single malt in the lineup from Southern Star out of Statesville, North Carolina. And you can only get it if you're at the distillery. And that's kind of what the cool thing is. If you're a member, not only can you buy a full bottle, but you can buy it for the same price and oftentimes less than if you were at the distillery yourself. And so that they make that single malt like a bourbon. And so if you taste it blind, you don't always know that it's a single malt. And you would think I could pull out a single malt anytime. Blind, you'd be surprised.
Chris, do you hear that?
Yeah, exactly. I always say when people say, all whiskey tastes the same or whatever, like, because I equate whiskey to art. And I just think that, okay, so you go to a museum and you look at one piece of art and you leave. They're all the same. No, that's not how it is. So I think that's like you said, somebody hasn't experienced it or hasn't experienced a lot of it. Might say all whiskey's the same, but
my brother-in-law still does that. My brother-in-law's like, but whiskey's all the. I'm like, dude, you're drinking, the Jim Beam honey over a giant vat of crushed ice.
Yeah.
Like we're not the same animal over here.
American honey.
You know what? You go drink that Screwball, that peanut butter whiskey. Like I'm telling you, like I don't mind flavored whiskey, like a little bit of it. I don't want to have several glasses of it, but I don't mind it, and I don't mind if somebody wants use ice, not use ice. I don't like when people use a ton of crushed ice. That's kind of my pet peeve. Like that shaved ice.
Yeah, you change.
You're pouring like 88 proof bourbon on crushed ice, and now you've got a watered, like you're drinking water. So like, what are we doing here? You just destroyed all the nuances, whatever it is that you're drinking.
or even the change in temperature on that will change the molecules and the structure of the.
Really? So
Oh,
how does that happen?
Oh,
Science.
yeah.
No, explain it to me. So are we doing reverse osmosis? Are we deionizing things? Is this
Science words.
Science words. Yeah.
science is happening? Well, no, it's. I mean, all the science of it. Sometimes I got a guy named Seabass who's my chief tasting officer. He's chief tasting officer, and he's he can talk about the esters and the way the yeast affects it, and yeah, I mean, there's literally just so many components that go into whiskey, and I know water obviously can open up the flavor. Putting some water and dropping it in there, especially you're going to proof it down a little bit so it's not so hot, but it can make it more interesting. And there is obviously a yin yang to that, but making something cold, because people like cold whiskey, and it's just like people that do those doing the ice bong. You know what I mean? You can take a bigger hit. I don't know if that's
Who knows?
the ice bong. You get the bong, you put all the ice into it, and then you take a much bigger hit out of it. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess maybe it's smoother going down, but I'm like, look, if you're just trying to get drunk, then take some shots.
Yeah,
But
that's what vodka's for.
yeah, that's what vodka's for, right? Just to take some shots, but tequila. Obviously, there's some tequila you want to shoot and some you want to sip, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So speaking of which, the idea that you have some whiskeys or alcohol you want to sip and some you want to shoot. You have this box very strategically laid out, from what I can tell. You got 4 bottles in it, A, B, C, and D listed on it. On the back, you've got where it's distilled or where it's from, roughly, like state.
You got some special eyeglasses on there.
Okay, I know. I do. And then you got the proof on the back, right?
What's the non-chill filter?
Right. Well, I say all that because we've had a few friends or people will do like blinds, and they don't go in depth. It's A, B, C, and D. Have your fun. Guess what it is. There's no details. There's no path of learning. What are you tasting? What are you smelling? What's the proof point look like? Where's it distilled? None of that in their minds matters, because whiskey is whiskey. All whiskey will taste the same. But what we've learned in doing this podcast and club, you can tell differences from states, where it's made, where it comes from, even
Tell
proof
what?
point.
The tell what?
Yeah. Right. So I love the fact that you've got that listed to an extent on the bottles. It's
Well, that's legal. That's just a legal requirement.
to
So
me,
you have to have the state it's distilled in. You have to have the ABV. You have to say pregnant women can't drink it. You have to say that it's whiskey. There's certain things. So the TTB, the Trade Tax Bureau, every round this has to go through COLA, Certificate of Label Acceptance, and so all these things can have to run the parameters. Now, what's I think fascinating as a side thing, if you'll notice under A, B, C, and D, you see on the bottle, it actually has the word sample on it.
oh, yeah,
We're the only TTB approved bottle that's ever had the word sample on it.
really?
And that's because they fucked up. Well, meaning like they said yes to A and then they said no to B, C, and D. And then because they said yes to A, they set their own precedent. They had to say yes to B, C, and D. And then every time, these things have to get filed every time, because if it's a different state, you can change the proof, but if it's a different state that hasn't been an A, B, C, or D, it has to pass COLA again. So every time this passes COLA. So for the first year and a half, they kept saying no, because you can't have sample in the bottle. And they're like, but you said it already. And then they had to go back to it. And then they just stopped. And then they're really used to it. They're
Past
fine with it.
practice. Yeah.
But the QR code, so there's a QR code in every bottle. There's a QR code on the tasting table. We converted the wheel into a table to help people pick out notes, the educational component. And there's a game. So you can guess the age, the proof, and the type of whiskey. And you'll actually get a score that tells you how accurate your palate is.
Oh, nice.
And for getting above a 40%, that's really good. So I think people think of percentages in terms of grades. We're thinking about putting a grade scale onto it just to make it easier for people to determine, if they did well or not. And then you don't have to get proof on the nose. If you get close to it, you'll get more points than if you're further away from it. Same thing with age. And then obviously the mash bill, we give you 4 different options. So, if it's we won't just say bourbon, rye, single malt, and wheat. Yeah, we get more specific in that, like, it's like, oh, one of these is a wheated bourbon. One of these is a rum finished bourbon. one of these is a cast strength bourbon. So there's these different things that are in there, so that way it helps them with the categories a little bit. And then the reveal page, there's a tasting video with my guys that'll walk you through the tasting. People can join our lives. We do live tastings, and then each sample, yes, it tells you the distillery, the age, the proof, all the aroma, all the tasting notes, all the finishing notes, and then the backstory of the distillery. So you get all that information there.
You guys have really come up with a really clever kind of a thing here. Did you come up with all of that, or did you have a little bit of help? Or
I mean, I was like coming up with, okay, how do we make the packaging awesome? Like I've never made packaging before, or custom glass. Custom glass is a whole other thing. Enclosures in this industry is a whole other deal. I can get into that all day. Just coming up with how do you make the bottle and the enclosure kind of work together and make all those things, and building the box from inside and out. So a lot of this was we were trying to figure out along the way. So I'd say initially we didn't we didn't name all the kits. We didn't say release 1, 2, and 3. We just sent out a generic the thing that was the same thing, but the QR code was different every time. Then we started putting the QR code on the bottles. Then we started kind of really building out more facts. We did always have the age, the proof, the type, the aroma. We did always have that from the beginning. So my guys, which had been drinking whiskey longer than I had, were definitely a part of that. I'd say one of the biggest steers from the get-go that we always did was we always wanted to focus on craft, mainly because we didn't think there was anything special about putting Maker's Mark and Bullet in the lineup. Right.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with Brown-Forman or any of these big brands that are making really good whiskey and are now actually following craft trends. But there's 3,000 whiskey brands you haven't heard of, and half of them you don't need to, but half of them are pretty damn good and making killer products and doing really weird, interesting things, and finding varietals of grain that they're bringing back to life that didn't exist. They're coming up with new distilling processes. They're doing weird finishes that you would think are weird that are actually phenomenal. They're doing blends. They're doing all the things that are setting the tone for what the industry is doing now. So distribution prevents these brands from really getting the shelf space in both bars and in liquor stores, so that you're only seeing a very, very small, less than 1% of what actually exists in the marketplace at your local liquor store, or even your Total Wine Bedmo, Liquor Mart, Benny's, whatever the big thing is in your area. You're only seeing a very, very small selection of what's available. So a lot of times we feature brands that only exist in their native state that you literally can't get anywhere else. So most people come for the blinds. We're giving them a dope experience, right? I would say we're an experience company, not a whiskey company, but we're giving you access to something that you couldn't access. And we're even getting even more fine tuning, like, can we get something really special? So like if we're going to put Pinhook in the lineup, then we need to put something in there that doesn't exist anywhere else, that only exists in our box. That is an unbelievable, one-of-a-kind blend, the first double barrel offering, something that's really off the charts good. And then we're going to sell you that full bottle for a bottle that you probably can't even get for less than if you were at the distillery, or less than if you could actually find it if you found it in the wild.
Yeah, if you could even find something like that.
Yeah, we're in Ohio, and Ohio is incredibly strict on their alcohol. So everything is state owned here. So we're even more limited than other places. We oftentimes make trips to Indiana or Kentucky or something like that to buy bottles, because it's just so limited here.
You got Middle West, come on.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Middle West, man, come on. That's one of my favorites. Middle West
Yeah,
is just,
good.
they're all bangers and affordable. I was just talking with them today because I'm like, dude, I need like more. We had their cask strength weeded in our December lineup. And that used to be really expensive, actually, and now it's unbelievably affordable.
They've
We had
grown
them
quite
in.
a bit.
Well, they source for a ton of brands too. So, and their distillate's so clean. And I mean, their Olorosa finishes, their Calvado. I mean, anything that comes in a tube from them is top shelf. They sent us some cool stuff over Christmas, and yeah, I mean, we're helping them. We're helping some people in the area do barrel picks for them. We're super fans, and we're always in their corner.
You're speaking our language when it comes to craft, by the way. We are craft guys through and through, which has a place in my heart. And I love the fact that you want to go after them. Because, like you said, while the big names have a place, it's kind of a starting point, and then you dive into craft. And once you dive into craft, you're like, ooh.
Yeah. Anybody that's really into
Yeah.
whiskey is doing that. And that's kind of what we're chasing. More of the craft experience or things you can't get in other places unless you go searching for it.
Yeah, the allocated. It's like have you guys had JT Mellick?
No.
No,
Have you heard of JT Melick?
No.
I don't think so.
So these guys, they're crawfish farmers in Louisiana, right?
That's
This
cool.
guy, it's a fish company, fish food company, basically, right? Although there's, I think, crustaceans or whatever, and they mainly deal in like seafood, not fish food, but seafood. And they started making whiskey out of the rice that they grow the crawfish in. And I'm telling you, I think I got a bottle of it behind me somewhere. There's a crawfish on the bottle, and you're like, what the fuck is 100% rice whiskey? Is this just like a really hot sake or something? It is like one of the deepest, richest bourbons. And for people that are out here, I mean, it's now matriculated into people that are going for the Wellers and the PTACs and all that. Like, like they're trying to find that JT Melick cast strength, and we have it, and it's phenomenal, and it's off the charts, stellar. And it's just one of these like rare finds that I'd say it's cross pollinating. That the people that want to go get the Blantons and the Weller single barrels, I get it. I have all that too. And if I see if I see an Old Forester single barrel for $80 a total wine, I buy it because I love it. I know it's going to be awesome, right? There's nothing wrong with getting an allocated bottle MSRP. There's fun in that hunt, right? But there's some of these other ones that people don't know that are rare or that are harder to find, and it's trying to get them to realize, no, you should be chasing some of these too.
Kind of digging deep a little bit.
Deep cuts.
Deep cuts. That's right. So we just had A. That's what we were just drinking.
I think that's weeded.
You think it's a weeded?
Yeah.
Okay. Nick, what do you think?
gosh.
It was good.
It was good. It was really good.
It wasn't.
You wanna hand me the
It was
bottle?
friendly.
So we'll go ahead and
We'll
scan
find
this
out.
and see what this is. But your vote is a weeded. And what were you thinking?
I can tell you what it is. I know what all the lineups
All
are.
right, great.
Okay.
Yeah. What is A?
Oh, I can tell by the little thing of white cone in the corner. That's the
Prestige.
Prestige.
Yep.
Prestige.
Ooh, all right,
Okay.
nice. The
Okay.
Prestige. Yeah, that one we were donating to Live.Stay. That's why I saw the
Live Not
the
Stay?
logo. Live.Stay. Yeah, it's
Oh yeah.
it's suicide awareness. So A is out of Ranger Creek, but they're out of San Antonio, Texas, and Ranger Creek. This is a weeded bourbon. And I think this is 98 proof, 96 proof. It's somewhere around there. And yeah, so weeded bourbon. I think it's 4-year. It's 3 or 4-year. That heat in Texas makes any 3-year taste like it's 5 or 6 or 7. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That maturation rate. And these guys were essentially brewers, right? They're making beer. They make their beer there is awesome. They got all these killer beers there. We were visiting them a couple of years ago, and they wanted to make whiskey. And the owner, he was like, I don't know, he was this European. All my European accents always sound like Malcolm X. So it's like, I don't want to make the whiskey. He put his flesh in the pot.
That is Malkovich.
Pay the man his money. He beat me straight up. But I think he's like a Swedish guy. He's like, we're not making whiskey. See, it's not far from that, right? Swedish is like you're giving direction. It's Sven sweet and make it bro, right? And they said no, and they went off and just made the whiskey anyways. A couple years later, he's like, hey, try this whiskey. He's like, this is really good. It's like, we made that. So they started making whiskey, and man, we were there, and that was maybe the first. When we go on these trips, it's great because you're hanging out with the owners, they're popping barrels. They probably popped like 30 barrels when we were there. I mean, it was
That's great. That's a good time.
We were hydrating, and it was just like, we got a red wine, blue one. And we're like, what's that? We're like, it's red corn, it's blue corn, it's white corn. And we got it all in one spot. We're like, we're going to try that. Of course we're going to try that. And I said, they sent us all their stuff. And I said, do you have anything that like isn't out yet? And they're like, well, yeah, it's going to become a flagship like version of what we sell, but it's not going to be available for another 4 months. But we've got this weeded bourbon that we think is really special. And I was like, I'd love to have that in the lineup because once we try that in the sample blind. And so once we know a brand that we like, then they send us samples. So we don't really choose brands, we choose whiskey. So a lot of brands we don't know about, they'll send us whiskey, we put it in a blind. There's some brands that we really love. Ben Halliday, we know we want them in the lineup. So it's more like, what are we going to put in the lineup when they're in the lineup? We know Frey Ranch. So it's like, can we get a barrel pick of the rye? Can we do something really cool with them? Right. So it's more about then trying to fine tune it if it's a brand that we already know that we like and we love. Like I said, Pinhook, the CEO reached out to me. They're in one of our lineups. And I was like, look, I love Pinhook, but you guys are everywhere. You're probably one of the most like accessible on premise. Like you'll go to bars and you'll see Pinhook everywhere. And because it's really good. And their blender, Sean Joseph, he's a buddy now and golf them. He's awesome. But I'm like, let's do something that like, I was trying to get their 10-year vertical. I'm like, can we get 3 barrels of the 10-year vertical and like splice it together and make a custom blend out of the 10-year vertical? And he's like, maybe. And then he called me. He's like, I can't. Fuck. So we did something that was really cool from them. So we're always trying to find something that's really fine tuned. Like Koval. Koval was in our lineup, and I'm fine with Koval. Really, I'll tell you, the owners are really interesting and awesome, and they make a kosher whiskey. They're out of Chicago, but I was like, you guys are pretty well distributed. I mean, I was in Japan like last summer, and you guys were in one of the bars. So that guy was an expat from Chicago, so that was kind of a biased element. So, but they made a Thresh and Winnow series of like a higher end allocated thing, and they did 100% millet, and I'm like, millet? I didn't know you can make whiskey from millet, and it's totally interesting and out there. Honestly, it wasn't. I didn't dislike it, but it wasn't like my favorite. It wasn't like, oh, I want to drink this all the time. But people love that in a blind because it's unique and awesome and interesting, and their bottles, one of the most gorgeous bottles you've ever seen. I think people just, they gravitate towards it. But that's an allocated bottle that's like $110 that we sold for like $80.
It's always it's nice to try something that you wouldn't normally have, and typically you wouldn't do that unless you have a situation like this, right? Somebody picked it out or something, and I got to try this. It might not be my jam, but I'm glad I tried that experience, like with the millet.
Yeah, I equated it to when we were doing this, and my buddy was like, "We should do craft." I kind of I had a friend that did like an international candy subscription, and every month he gets all these candies from around the world. And I remember I had this one from the Sudan, and it was like, I'm like, does it have to be chalky and spicy? Like, this thing is fucking terrible. But I was also just like, I didn't like it, but I really liked that I got to try it. So I would say like there's things that are in the lineup that we categorize as too weird. We had one where they put hops in at the end, and so it was this single malt, but we noticed the word whiskey wasn't anywhere on the lineup because the fact that they put hops in at the very end all of a sudden made it not whiskey. Now, that doesn't negate it from being in the kit. We've had things that technically weren't whiskey. I mean, everyone knows like the Templeton story, or like, oh, we were providing Al Capone with the whiskey, and it was all fucking made up. It was just MGP, right?
Right.
Well, this guy's grandmother was a woman named Lorraine Sextro, and she was the most well-known female bootlegger during the Prohibition era. And the train would stop by at the back of their farm, and they would load it up, and it was supposedly like Al Capone's favorite whiskey. And this Iowa Legendary bottle is the grandson basically found the blueprints for the still. It was a 26-gallon still, so he replicated the 26-gallon still and made like 20 of them. And it has basically 4 ingredients. It has water, bread rye, yeast, and sugar cane. Okay. And that was the actual Prohibition recipe that they were drinking back then. Now, once you put sugar in it, it's not whiskey anymore. Okay. And it says Iowa Legendary Rye. It doesn't say the word whiskey anywhere on it, right? But I'll tell you what, you put sugar in something and you put that in a blind, people go, what the fuck? This is awesome. But it had a story. It was authentic. And yeah, that was $100 bottle. We got to sell for $70. So it was just this killer bottle with a killer story and unique and awesome, and not so left of center that it's going to turn people off.
So how does that work in terms of you being able to sell it for less than the distillery and stuff? Is it just because you're buying so much of it, you're buying 3 barrels or or whatever, that they kind of mark it down for you? Or is it
No, I mean, we
like
can
an
negotiate
advertising
the
benefit
wholesale.
kind of?
No, so sometimes we will get good deals from the distributor, right? Because we're doing a volume play, and we don't have clauses in California where we have to sell it in certain capacities. Right now, if I sell it for less than you can get it at the distillery, I get permission from them. I'm like, hey, do you mind that I'm selling it for less? And some of them say no, and I go, okay. And then it is what it is. And we do shipping discounts, so we try to do all these things, right? But so if you look at the distillery has an FOB, and then that's what it gets to the distillery. That's what it gets to the wholesaler, and the wholesaler is going to mark it up 30%. So let's just say it's $40 FOB. You take 30% of that. All right, that's going to be 52 that they're going to try to sell it right to me for. And then technically, I would do a 30% markup and sell that for $15.60 on top of that. And then that would put it at $67.60, right? Now, if I can sell that for $60, right, and I'm getting it for 52, and I got shipping discounts and Shopify's taking a fee, now I might make $3 or $4 when I sell that bottle, right? I don't want to lose money when I sell a bottle, but I don't mind if we don't make, I didn't make $15 on that bottle, instead I made $5 or $6. Like, for us, the bottom line is more about, can we keep our members happy? So we're a subscription, but we're really a membership. Like you can buy one off, you don't have to become a member, but the benefits of the membership is you can get these bottles. So like right now, I'm getting some allocated bottles. We're going to start a thing called Bobby Stash. So, I got some Old Fitz bottled and bond. We're going to sell that for $60. I got some Midwinter Night's Dram. Instead of 180, we're going to sell that for 130, right? And basically give people access to allocated bottles. So, if you buy 5 allocated bottles from us, it technically is paying for your membership because you would have paid, much greater MSRP somewhere else.
I mean, you always end up getting a deal when you join something, and I think that buys people in too, and then it becomes more about the whole experience and less about just the product.
I also love the fact that you guys sell bottles for what you sample out. So the podcast got started out of a club. And what you guys do sample wise is kind of what the club does, where we come with a bottle that maybe one or two of us have had at this point, but no one else has. And it's something unique, something different. It's the idea of growing and challenging at the same time with 8 other guys, right? The fun thing for you, and what I love about this is you now get to become the person that shares that bottle. So if I like a sample, I can buy that bottle and now I can take it to a group of friends and be like, look, I got this bottle from this experience. I got to sample in a blind. It's wonderful. Let's try it together. Let's do this, have a glass, talk. And I love that the idea of community that brings together, right? It's no longer, if I did it by myself, I could just keep it in my collection and just drink it by myself. But you also have the opportunity to share something new with someone else that I may not be able to get anywhere else. I may never see this again.
I love that analogy. In fact, I'm already thinking about a whole marketing campaign around what you were just like, when you get to share that bottle, I'm like, we do this every quarter.
Right.
And you're right. There is that great, it's kind of like that, when you play somebody that song from that band that nobody's heard of before they got big and they sold out.
Right.
Whatever it was. And it's like, God damn it, Penelope, you didn't have to sell the MVP. Although I love Michael Daniels, they're awesome. That there's this element to like finding something, discovering it, and then sharing it. And you hit on it, like we're very much a whiskey community and we're proponents of the whiskey community and respecting the history of it. I mean, the first thing that was ever taxed in the country, was a big part of the barter system, as currency, in the 17s and 1800s and even small parts of the 1900s in certain parts of the country. But it's also one of the few industries where, we were traveling through Texas, great example. And, we were at the end of the trip and we're like, where else have you been? We were talking with Still Austin. We did a 2-barrel blend with them that was off the charts. And I'm like, oh, we were over at Iron Root and we were like, oh, we love those guys. And they're competing with them, right? But they're rooting for Texas whiskey. And you do not see that in the wine industry. You do not see that in other industries where everybody's hoping everyone else fails and they succeed. There's some quiet camaraderie that exists, when what was it, what was the Rick House when Heaven Hills Rick House burned down, right? Like people didn't go piss on them, like, oh, let's put out the flames and piss on them. No, they said, hey, do you need any whiskey? Can we help out? Like, what do you need? When Buffalo Trace flooded, oh, this Buffalo Trace doesn't need our help. Everybody stepped up. They lost a lot of barrels to that. They had a lot of infrastructure that, their supply chain got screwed up. Like people step up and say, can we help you? Some cool things come out of that, like the buff turkey, right? There's some different things that can happen in different sourcing. There's people that are sourcing MGP, they're sourcing from Middle West, they're sourcing from Southern Star in Statesville. And so it's this interesting group and community within the industry itself. And then there's the communities that you guys formed, which is the cool part about whiskey, the communal part, which is, I have it written on our wall in graffiti, which is great whiskey's meant to be shared. You're not going to find a bottle at my house that isn't opened up.
Yeah, that's the other cool part of this. A lot of times we feel bad when we're on the podcast because we'll open this once in a lifetime bottle that is, it's long gone. It hasn't been around for anymore. And we're telling everybody how great it is. And it's like, well, good luck though. We can't, you can't get it anymore. It's gone, the bottle's disappeared, but it's cool that you can let people share it and then they can buy the bottle like that. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. There's nothing. So there was a company that came out that was doing blinds, and I won't talk about it because it's a different. They were trying to do a blind experience, and I joined it. We had already formed our company. We were on the way, and I'm like, oh my god, somebody beat us to it, and I went and joined it. It was really expensive because the person that started it was like, I'm doing this, and I'm like, okay. And they sent us these samples, and I drank it, and I'm like, okay, this is good. And then I was like, how do I find out what it is? And there wasn't anything that told me what it was. And I emailed the person. I was like, all right, so when do you tell us what it is? And they were like, well, it's blind. And I was like, well, yeah, it's a blind tasting, right? And they're like,
But then you find out
"Tell us
later.
what it is." Yeah. And then they're like, no, it's blind the whole way through. And I'm like, well, no, you're just looking, like, what are we doing over here? Like,
Yeah, look
like,
up the
you're
definition.
never gonna tell me what it is, and it was a custom blend, right? So it wasn't like it was they were sourcing a bunch of stuff and blending it, and I get that, but I was also relieved. I'm like, oh well, that's not what we're doing. Some people don't understand. Like when we were talking to Ben Halliday, it took us a while for us to get them in the lineup because somebody in their department, like they said, well, we're not allowing anyone to white label our whiskey, and so white labeling is taking other people's whiskey and just put it in a thing and not doing anything to it. And we don't really let anybody in our lineups that are white labeling in terms of if you're sourcing, you have to be blending it, you have to finish it, you
gotta
have to
do
do
something.
to it, right? But otherwise, there's not a story there. It's not interesting enough for us. And so I'm like, well, we're not. I'm like, technically, we are white labeling. We are putting your whiskey into our labeled bottles, but we are not positing it that way, right? The whole thing is that we're marketing your product. In the industry, they call it liquor on the lips. The marketing, the hardest thing to do is to get people to try a product. Otherwise they're making decisions on price and how cool the bottle looks or what their friends say. But you guys get together and you all bring a bottle, and not everybody likes the same thing.
Right. We've had a few that some guys love, others are like, I'm all right. I don't need another glass. I don't need to
Right.
try this ever again.
Yeah. And when we get together quite a bit and do that with multiple bottles, and it will be interesting that, say, I'll take a sip of something and I'm like, wow, this is quite fantastic. And then somebody's like, else is drinking it. They're like, oh, you liked it? And I'm like, yeah, you don't? No, it's not, I don't like it. But, you can see that it wasn't like they didn't have the same experience that I did. And I think that's
Everybody's
a whole,
different.
yeah, that's a whole another fun thing to sit down and do together.
Yeah.
Are you guys on sample B yet?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Sample B is right
I
here.
think that's a rye, I believe.
It's a hot rye.
I know mine's gone. I love that.
Or are you on sample B or C?
B.
B.
Okay.
Before we find out what this is, you made a comment that I love because we've gone through for the podcast and even for the club this idea of a year of sourced bottles, and the idea not is it good or is it bad, but is it worth it? Because a lot of companies, there's quite a few companies out there that get started sourcing, but what are you doing? What are you doing to it? Are you blending? Are you finishing? Or are you just taking whatever you bought from someone else and put it in a bottle and then you put it on the shelf and you make profit? The fact that you guys are willing to go after companies that source, but they have to meet certain requirements, I respect that a lot because they're doing something to it. The requirement of you have to do something other than we slapped a label on it and said, it's good, buy it.
But dark art. Have you guys had dark arts before?
No, I've seen them, but I haven't had it.
Yeah. So there's some bottles over here, and we got the Julepier finish staves, the front choke staves, and this guy, Macaulay, who's kind of their master blender over there, was working over at Wilderness Trail with Dr. Pat for a while, and I mean, this guy does a lot of mushrooms, and he's really into the mushroom. And whatever he's doing, he's enhancing his life experience. But this guy, his palate and the way he blends is so off the charts good. Like, why wouldn't we want to include the artistry of that? Okay, you're not making a product. There's a guy out in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's called Old Raleigh Distillery, and he got this big still and the whole thing, and he never used it because then he just realized he's really good at blending and sourcing unbelievable stuff. Have you heard of World Whiskey Society, the Doc Holliday bottle with the bullets
Yep.
in it? So they sent us a bunch of bottles, and we were going to put them in the lineup because they had a Musinara that was really good. They had a tequila finished bourbon that was really good. The rum wasn't overly rummy, which most rum finishes are too much rum. And then you get like a seagrass, which is a perfect balance, or you get something like that. And then they sent us the Doc Holliday bottle. It was a 6-year Doc Holliday. And I was like, did you guys make this? And they're like, no, it says MGP. And I went, oh, okay. I was like, so it's just a white label, and they were like, what's white label? And I'm like, you guys white label? You don't know what white label is? I'm confused. And then and they said, well, can we send you the tenure? And I'm like, I'm not going to say no to the tenure that they're going to send me because I'm curious of what I'm sure tenure MGP is awesome. And I drink it, and I'm like, holy shit! I'm like, is this tenure MGP? This is so off the charts, deep, rich. It was like, I mean, it was so unbelievable. They said, no, there are these barrels that we found in Texas. And I went, okay. Uh, how'd you find them? What happened? They said, well, there was this guy named Carlos Lavelle, and he was in Georgia, and the whole family, the Lavelle family, for like 5 generations, were making whiskey illegally. And they'd evade the feds, and they bounce up the Appalachians, and they come back. And when this guy was in his 70s, his daughter convinced him to go legitimate. See, when people start making whiskey, they're not always good at it, and sometimes they never get good at it. They apprentice, or they come from a wine background, or they understand the wood, or like the Ranger Creek, the brewing background. They usually have a better chance of getting good at it. Well, this guy was making whiskey since he was like 7, and so he started this Ivy Mountain Distillery. His distillate was so good. This sour mash Georgia bourbon, just as White Dog, unaged, was so good. People loved it. But then he was aging some of it 6 months. And then 3 years into the operation, he died. And these barrels that were going to be aged 6 months sat there for 4 or 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Bardstown got word of it, bought a bunch of it, put it in their Fusion series, their Explorer series. Some of it ended up in an Art of Alchemy blend with Jim Rutledge's barrels with Castle and Key. And then the rest ended up in Texas for another 5-6 years. And now that 5 years in Texas is like 9 years, right? That maturation rate, that heat level. They found the barrels, they brought it back to Georgia, got 10 years. So if you see a Doc Holliday bottle and it's 10-year, sometimes it's from Kentucky. I mean, I don't know where they source all their stuff from, but you can tell the state that it's distilled from. But this one, if you find one that has Georgia on it, and they were selling this for like $80 to $220, and it's gimmicky, and there's bullets in the casing and whatnot. But you can't find these barrels anymore. So when they said that to us, I said, look, we've never put a bottle in that's white label, but we're going to make an exception. You need to put his story on the bottle. His legacy's in that bottle. So we put a neck tag on the bottle. I think our members got it for like $120, which is wild. And that was just me telling the distributor, I said, here's the deal. I'm going to sell this whiskey out of existence. So just give me a good deal. Like my members are middle class to upper middle class. Like, let's take care of them. And then I said, as it started going, like, I'm like, they're like, are you selling? I'm like, yeah. I called the guys. I said, can you just hold back 2 barrels and let it get to 12 year? So now there's just 2 barrels left in existence from this distillery, and we have them both. And it just hit 12 year. And they've never made a 12-year Doc Holliday, so they got to create a whole new label for it or whatever. And so our members are going to get that. I'm hoping. But when I put it in a blind for my guys, because like I said, we do blinds. We don't choose brands. We choose a whiskey. My guy whose palate is phenomenal, he calls me. He's like, Bob, are you fucking with us? Because I'll fuck with him. I'll put like, my guy's like a 4 Roses guy. I'll put like a limited edition 4 Roses in there just see if he can B-. I'm like, oh, you hate the thing that you love. What does that feel like? How do you sleep at night? Oh, it's terrible for you. And he's like, are you fucking, is this William LaRue? Did you put William LaRue Weller like in a blind? Like I'll pop in little unicorns in there just to test there. And I went, no, we could have this in the lineup. And I will say it's the best whiskey I've ever had. It's phenomenal. It's so deep and it's rich. It's not overly oaked. It's just, and it's funny because here's this craftsman that grew up in this industry doing everything illegally, and we get to kind of share this spirit, this thing that he created. But he never intended it to become what it became. He never really was. They were just making moonshine. They were making unaged product or aged at 6 months. So the barrels were kind of this side component, and the fact that it got as old as it did was really happenstance. So it's one of these interesting, deep, rich, amazing stories that we get to tell that story. We get to share the bottle and we get to tell the story.
I'm going to change my opinion. I don't think this is rye.
No,
No.
I don't either.
It's sitting too sweet.
I think it's high proofed.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a rye.
Yeah.
I think it might be more of a barley.
right.
It might even be it might be some
It might be
you
heavy
think-
corn.
like
You
a
think this
wheaten
is the
barley
bourbon?
yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be. It might just be higher proof.
Yeah. So this is B.
So it's this is a bourbon,
Okay.
but there's a finish on it. Can you tell what the finish
Oh.
is? What barrel? And this is why we picked this is we never had this finish in the lineup, and I've had plenty of samples finished like this sent to us. but it's always, it's just trying to find that balance of whether it works or not. This one, I was like, oh, this is right on the money. Usually, like wine finishes, you can really pick up on it, right?
Right.
Like especially like a port because it's so deep, and you kind of like go, oh, is it more aged? And it's usually much darker. And this is a rum barrel finish,
Oh,
Is it?
Oh, okay.
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 But it's not
and
very
it
There's that
doesn't
rummy.
even.
sweetness.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's not very rummy at all, and I think it's because they aged it in there for. They didn't really. I don't even know if you can call it a finish actually because it's in the. So I think it was 5 year, and then it was put in the rum barrel for like another year. No, 7 years. Two of them were in Cruzan rum barrels. So it's 5 year bourbon, and then what happens when you put it in a barrel longer is it mellows out. Like so, we did a thing with Pinhook where it's the first double barrel that they'd done, where they took a 3 year and then they rebarrel it for another 3 years. And when you put it in that new wood, you're going to get all this wood influence. But what happens is after about a year and a half, it mellows out, and you get this deep, rich texture in the 6 year that really tastes like a 10 or a 12 year. It's 103 proof. So this is out of West Fork Whiskey Company. This is in Indiana. You guys can go visit them. This is Old Hammer. And yeah, this is the $75 we sell for $64.99. We have a guy around here, one of in the business park, that does some of our print work for us or helps with trade shows. And he was over here hanging out, and we had all these 10 different things we're having him try. And he kept pouring this bottle. He wouldn't stop. He's like, oh man, and that for me, when I see, it's one thing when people like things or they prefer things, but when I see a magnitude, like I learned to listen to not like, oh, well, let's tab. This isn't like Finland. Like we got 3 second place votes and 4 first place votes. If you know anything about Finland's voting system, but you're like, what are the Finnish doing? He said it's just a finished whiskey. I think it's a finished whiskey. I'm confused. But if one of my guys is fawning over something, I take that in a little different capacity. I put a heavier magnitude to it. But yeah, I think this is just an easy pour. And, I like that we're getting things that are above 100 proof, but aren't so hot that it's scaring off some of the newbies.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very approachable.
It holds
Mhm.
that finish well without it being overpowering. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I would have never caught that it was a rum finish. I don't
Not
think.
until it sits with you for a little bit almost.
Yeah.
It's subtle. Yeah. Most rum finishes, when I drink it, I'm like, this tastes like rum.
Yeah. Yeah, it's on the
I'm
nose.
like, this
Yeah.
could just literally be rum. Yeah, you're gonna get some vanilla notes. You're gonna get traditional rum notes, and I think on the nose you can, if I can inception you and make you. I'll say that, and then you'll smell it, right? Or especially you empty the glass out and you'll smell it, and you're like, oh, I'm getting a lot of vanilla on that. I get that, but after the fact. But I like that it's subtle. Something that's overly finished, something that's like, we just had a from J. Rieger Kansas City style whiskey, and that so Kansas City style means they're putting like 2% 15-year like sherry into the whiskey. It's not even a finish. They're like 2% of the whiskey is sherry. It's not whiskey anymore. It's Kansas City style whiskey, right? So
Which is very unique.
Yeah, we've had some of that. It's
Yeah.
very good, but it is very different.
It's unique. It's great in a blind, and yeah, our members can get it for $45. So it's kind of like a good win-win.
So you're in California. How do you go about finding these out of state craft brands and distilleries to go after?
I mean, my guy had a list from the beginning. My guy was pushing craft, and and some of them it's funny. Some of them are so big now that like we almost don't want them in the lineup now, like a Westland or something like that, right? But like we've had Westward in the lineup. They're kind of one of the OGs of the craft movement. So some of the ones we reached out to, a lot of them didn't return our call because we didn't even have a website like when we were reaching out, right? Luckily, we had a distributor that made a lot of different introductions for us and formed a lot of relationships for us, which is great. And some of them just don't understand because there's really two different parts of the component when you work with the distillery. There's the sample form, there's the liquid, and then there's the full bottle form. And everyone understands the full bottle form because that runs through a distributor, and that's pretty traditional. Sample form, it's harder for them to wrap their head around. So we didn't want to do what some brands do when they make samples, which is to say, hey, we're marketing your product. You got to give it to us for free. We're working with small American craft distillers. We want to showcase and uplift them rather than say, hey, what's in it for us alone? No, how do we make this a symbiotic relationship? And that's why, now we just, had our 17 release. So there's been 68 technically. There's been a couple that we retreaded on. So we've had roughly, 60 something distilleries that we've worked with, and we have 60 friends that are in the industry now. There's some that we reached out to and it didn't work out. And then my guy makes a post about it, and then their president, their founder reached out, like, how do we get in the lineup? I'm like, we tried like 3 years ago, and this is what happened, and so since we did a partnership with Fred Minnick, so Fred Minnick, we did a kit with him a couple years ago, and it did really well. It was not one of our lineups; it was a separate kind of kit lineup, Fred Minnick offering. And then we now our March lineup that's just shipped out yesterday is a pure collaboration with Fred. So it was like, hey, look, Fred you used to shit on craft like 10 years ago. Now it's like 80% of your top, 100 lineup, and he's really come full circle on that. And he's become a really good friend, since we worked with him the first time. I was like, can we just sync up on a lineup? It's really hard for me to create two lineups at the same time. He's like, sure. So we synced up and made a really cool killer lineup. And I think having that cachet, being kind of the only whiskey brand that Fred's partnered up with in a certain capacity that can retail, that wasn't just like a barrel pick or something like that, has given us a little bit of cachet, and just, if you search Fred Minnick and whiskey, you'll find our site, So we have a lot of brands that reach out to us now, which is great. Every September, so that's why I was asking, you guys got the Prestige kit. The September one is called Inception, which I'm like, God damn it, we did 2 Christopher Nolan movies in a row. Like, what did we do?
That wasn't intentional, huh?
Like December, we just did Best of the Best, which is like a fight movie from the 80s. If you haven't seen a karate fight movie, it's awesome. And then we just did Vision Quest because Fred's a big wrestling fan. But these are all visionaries. So I'm like, oh my God, we did another fight movie, 2 in a row. So the Inception kit was like the idea of we're doing an Inception on the idea. Like if you say, hey, I'm getting cherry notes, someone will get cherry. Like you say that. The fact that I said, oh, you're going to pick up vanilla on the glass, and you will. So our members did an Inception on us, and it made suggestions on brands that we should have in the lineup. So, we get like 100 suggestions. We reach out to all of them. A third of them get back to us, mainly because these are small business owners that don't answer all their emails. And we try all the samples. We do everything blind, and we create a lineup from that. But that lineup ended up having some bangers in there. I mean, I don't know if you guys have had High Wire out of South Carolina.
Yeah.
We have.
Yeah.
We have. I don't remember why or how, but we have had High Wire. Yes.
I think we
And
just
it was good.
Yeah, I think it was just a random thing.
I think so, yeah.
That's how we find a lot of ours is random.
Yeah, that one was just phenomenal. Like the nose on that bourbon is maybe one of the best noses of any whiskey I've ever had. I'm just like, oh my God, I don't have to drink this. I can just smell this for hours. I'm going to drink it though.
And coming out of a coastal state that's pretty rum heavy or like vodka heavy, not a ton of whiskeys coming out of South Carolina, North Carolina, that East Coast region.
That aren't rum.
Yeah, that aren't rum.
Or something to do with rum.
It's a lot of fun to find those because they do it well. They do whiskey well for beach drinking. That's what we have found.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard to do.
And there's some laundering operations going off on the coast over there too. So I'm just gonna say we went to some distilleries and I saw some like 80,000 gallon stills, and I'm like, oh my God, how many barrels are you making? Like, we're making 4 a month. And we're like,
something's not adding up here.
There's some fucking shit going on over here. Like this for sure.
The tours just of this little section, they're like, that's off limits over here.
Oh yeah. This guy's like, why don't we get on my jet ski? He's gonna play pickleball. And I'm like, oh, it's definitely there's cocaine somewhere. I don't know what's happening. It's like we're gonna take these barrels off and it's gonna be full of cocaine. I don't know what's happening. Have you guys ever had Southern Star?
No.
We did bourbon.
No.
So I'll tell you what, if you get a cast strength Southern Star weeded bourbon at the distillery, it's going to be, $75-$80. I've got barrel pick cast strength Southern Star bourbon our members are getting for $50. Wow. And I got to tell you, so Pete Barger, so they have Southern Star and Southern Distilling. Southern Distilling is their source, so they're sourcing for like 120 brands out there. If you ever see North Carolina on the bottle, just like if you see Indiana, we know it's MGP. If you see, Ohio on the bottle, and they're like, wait, they're not, like, wait a minute, like, yeah, that's Middle West, right? And if you see North Carolina, it's Southern Star. And so Pete sent us, we did a barrel pick with them in our box. It was called Some Like It Hot. It was all barrel picks, including the hazmat. That was a 26-year, 151 proof.
Wow.
It was a bourbon barrel pick from Frey Ranch. It was a weeded bourbon barrel pick. It's maybe one of my favorite lineups of all time. It's one of these ones that it's so hard to top because we just sold everything out so quick, and people got mad at me because they waited like 2 months to do the lineup and everything was gone. And he sent us 5 samples. One of them was like, he said, "Don't look at the color. Whatever you do, don't look at the color." And I went, "Okay, all right." So I had to like find like non-translucent, like opaque looking glasses for my guys. And sure enough, one of them is the darkest whiskey I've ever seen in my entire life. And it's a 40. I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. It's not finished or anything. I'm like, the fuck is going on? And sure enough, I put it in a blind and it destroys. It just like everybody's like, oh my God. And so I called Pete. He's like, I was really hoping you weren't going to pick that. And I'm like, okay, well, he's like, I already bottled it. I was going to give away his gifts for the rest of the year. And it was an experimental barrel. Now, they had 2 barrels that I later on found out because we just visited them that they groved out the inside of it. So it's this new technique where they create more surface area with inside the wood.
Okay.
And it's groved out, like especially inside the barrel. It's a really kind of interesting special process. So one of the barrels won the New York Spirits competition outright. The other barrel was our barrel. And this thing, I got to tell you, I mean, it was just off the charts. And it was funny, to prove that, like we were talking about earlier, you can't please everybody. There's some guy that's had like, he's a big Southern Star fan, and he's the only guy that, like, everybody, if I had 80 people in a room, you're going to find a few people that hate A, B, C, or D. It's going to happen. Nobody would hate on this one whiskey. But the one guy that really knew Southern Star, he's like, I've had all these things from Southern Star. None of them taste like this. And he was mad about it. And he sent me like 5 of his samples from barrel picks. So I'm like, no, I know what their whiskey tastes like. I'm very well aware of that. With Frey Ranch, we picked that barrel. We went out there with Colby and Ashley, and we hung out with them in the room. And it's such a special experience when you get to pick a barrel with an owner. And there's one that was really bright, that was really, I would say, reflective of their core distillate. And there was this other one that was just, it was kind of vegetal and mushroomy and different, and not in a bad way, but dusty. It had this dusty note, and I'm a sucker for a dusty note. And I kept drinking this fucking thing. And maybe that was just me, but it was my first time really picking a barrel personally, that my guys were like, you pick it. But my guys being my guys, because they're not snobs, they're so great, they listen to everybody. And there's this elderly woman over in the corner of the room. Well, I'm not gonna say elderly, but older. Okay. She's like 98 years old. She just comes out of the shadows with one eye. No, it was the distiller's wife. She was probably like 50 something, 60 or whatever. And my guy goes, "What do you think?" And she's holding this glass like it's like a chalice from, like,
The Last Supper.
like some like anime fucking. She steps out of the shadows and she goes, "I keep drinking this one." And the head distiller, Russell, I just remember him side-eye her because he was like, "Shut the fuck up, Nancy. Like, that's nothing like any of our distillate." He didn't say that, but I felt like that's what he was saying with his eyes. And it turned out that this barrel was a cooperage that Frey Ranch never uses, ever. So it was this left of center. And in my mind, I'm also thinking, you know what? Let's do something special. Let's do something different. And we went with that. And yeah, it crushed, and not everybody loved it. But if you want some Southern Star barrel pick cast strength bourbon for $50, I'm telling you, you're never going to find a better whiskey for that price ever. Other than Middle West, which is where you guys are from. I will say all your shit, fucking bomb.
Speaking of stuff you won't find, C. What is C?
Where's it out of? What's this?
Indiana. So it's MGP,
okay.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is MGP. This was technically aged in Indiana for 4 years, then aged in Texas for 5 years.
Okay.
Oh,
it's like chocolatey.
It's dark.
And
It is really dark, and it's
so that 5 years in Texas is like an additional 4. So this is almost like a 13-year. If you really think about it,
It's like a multiplier.
It is. So what's crazy to me is, so this will be the second MGP product out of Texas that I've had, and there's something about Texas that if you age it there or do something there in Texas with it, it takes it from being bright MGP to a dark roast coffee. I mean, it changes it drastically. To the point where you're like, what is that?
Yeah, well, it's like, it's funny, like Garrison Brothers, which is really becoming like the face of Texas whiskey. And I've had some Garrison Brothers that I love, and I've had some that I'm like, ugh, that's not my vibe, right? And what's really interesting is what I've found, and now years later, I've kind of figured it out. Like, if you put some water into something that's overly bold, it really makes it more nuanced and not maybe as like you know like just make you kind of go, I don't know. And so I agree. Like this is just one of these things. Now this is, I think, just in my opinion, in this lineup, this particular 9 year is one of my favorites. And this was something that didn't come out, I think, for another 5 months after this released.
Chris and I, we don't like the young MGP stuff. Fair? We've had a few older MGPs that were like 10 plus.
We've had so much of it too.
This drinks nothing like MGP.
No, usually we can say right away.
Right.
And yeah, I saw Indiana and I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's really good.
So technically this is white labeled, but the reason why it worked was they did something to it. They brought it to Texas for 5 years.
Yeah.
Which was, it sounds stupid. It sounds really dumb. You know, it's funny. You go to all these places, like you go to Whiskey Acres and you go like, where's your rick house? You know what they use in most of these places when you go to Texas? They put them in these storage containers.
Really?
When these damn storage containers get so hot, and it's just like that heat there. They're cooking their fucking whiskey. The maturation weight, like
Cooking it in
when
the
we did
wood.
a barrel pick, we picked 2 barrels with Still Austin. So we own a trademark called the smallest batch. The small batch for me, which is 2 barrels. And so that was the first of our smallest batch series. And if I could have we should have blended 3 barrels, because if I could have just had like 250 of these bottles to sell instead of like 120, I'm just saying, like, because there was only, after 5 years, there was only like 30 gallons left in the barrel with the maturation rate. There's a dude. So we were traveling. We do a whiskey trip every year. And this last fall, we went from Atlanta, visited our people in World Whiskey Society, went up north, and we visited Pete Barger. We went to a place where they converted a penitentiary into a still. That place was wild. Some ghosty shit going on. There's some black mold. We had to get out of there. And then we kept heading north and went all the way to DC. And one of the places in South Carolina, before we hit up our buddy Brandon over at Old Raleigh, was this place called Broad Slab. And it's in the middle of fucking nowhere. Okay. And we get there. And the thing is, like, we've seen some hillbilly stills. We've seen some like crafty, like overly crafty, crazy shit. We've seen a guy that like put a bowling ball and a jackhammer and banged out a soup kettle drum from the Navy and made a fucking still out of it, and all sorts of crazy shit, right? And that guy's got 9 loaded weapons like in his distillery at all times. I'm like, oh shit, this is some Terminator 2 shit going on. Like this guy's like fucking waiting for his son to fucking, make fucking Skynet self-aware or whatever the fuck it is. And so we get there, we get on a tractor, and he fucking takes us to the back. And this guy, like, his accent, and I'm not judging people's accent, but his accent was so thick, like deep, like South Carolina thick. Like, you're like, this guy's never read a book in his life. And we get to this place. No, we get to this location, and the craftsman of what he built himself with his masher and his still is probably the most amazing. I mean, this guy's this like hidden genius. You know what I mean? He's like this beautiful mind where he thinks the spots are coming after him, but he's building some stills and he's getting it done. And so this guy's like built this thing out of like nothing, and he built the rick house, and he's like got 700 barrels in there. He's like, when I hit 1,000, I'm retiring. That's my retirement in there. Now, what he's doing, Broad Slab, they named the town Broad Slab because there's one piece of the tree that they can't use it for, and it's called the Broad Slab. And this town figured out a way to use it to become a foundational element for building roads. That's where Broad Slab comes from. And this guy had no father. His stepfather raised him on this farm. He's got 2 boys, and they just want to get in the dirt. They just want to grow things. And so they're not really into the whiskey, but he's really into the whiskey. And what he did in South Carolina is he's taking these barrels and he's putting them, after they're 2 years old, into the flue where they age tobacco.
Okay.
And in the flue, it gets 170 degrees in that. And for every 100 barrels he puts down in there, 3 of them explode because it gets so hot. And these barrels come out all fucking warped and shit. But it comes out dark. And part of me is going like, all right, is there like, maybe unsafe levels of nicotine in this thing? And like, I don't know, I'm worried. I'm like, and there's tobacco flavors and there's no nicotine in it. And he trademarked and patented this process. And sure enough, this motherfucker came up with a way that I'm trying to find a way to get in the lineup because it's so wild out there and really good. And I'm like, I don't know if he's going to understand the math and mechanics for being a sample in our lineup. And I'm really hoping we can convince him. But this guy's doing some he's making his own whiskey. He's doing all the stuff, right? But he's doing something that nobody's ever done. And I love that. And can we find a way to do that? And I think Texas is just, if they're just cooking the whiskey in a different way, and if they're putting it in these storage lockers or whatever the other,
Yeah, it's hot already.
I gotta expect some of them to blow up there too.
It's probably.
It's a
I bet you they
constant
come in one day and there's just whiskey pouring out of the storage container. But no, sure enough, like there was like 7 places we visited, and they're like, I'm like, where's the Rick House? And I'm like, just follow us. And like there's like rows of like, storage containers. And I'm like, okay. Like they open it up. What do you need? I'm like, is this a bitch to get to the barrel that's in the back? And they're like, yeah, we got to take everything out. And I'm like, okay. So they're kind of batching rows of containers, like they got to pull out the container, It's not super accessible.
So what company was that?
So this is Prideful Goat.
Prideful Goat. Okay.
And this is the 9-year. So, there's been some different age statements. A lot of Prideful Goat is 6 and 8 years. So I said, hey, can we get something special? And they're like, we got some that's 9-year. We got to change the label and all that. I'm like, do it. Change it. Like, let's do something fucking really cool. I remember they didn't send us a picture of it in time. So I had a 6-year Prideful Goat. And then I had my guy on the website. I'm like, can you flip the 6 and turn it into a 9? Because like they just fucking flipped it. So like, on our site, that's like a Photoshop. The funny thing is the real bottle looks exactly like that. I think they did the same fucking thing.
That's hilarious.
Sometimes they're like right against the wire. I'm like, how do we get the thing on?
If I lift you enough.
We have to figure it out. So you guys are on sample D now?
Sample D, yep.
All right. Now, as you'll see kind of like we did in this, like, Ranger Creek was, I think, 96 proof and then 103. I think that Prideful Goat was like 117, 118.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right. It was higher in proof. Yeah, let me just confirm.
I didn't think it tasted very high proof.
Yeah. Prideful Goat.
It's 117. Yeah.
117. Wow, nice.
95 rye, 5%, that classic 95.5.
Yeah.
MGP.
MGP is known
right?
for, yeah.
Yeah, that classic MGP. And then, so sometimes we tend to go up in proof. I mean, obviously, if we have a hazmat, we have to put it last. We've had a couple hazmats in the lineup. We had this one out of Colorado Springs. So the reason we did Prideful Goat, so Randy Sullivan from Bourbon Real Talk. We did a collab with him a year ago, last March. So everything in that lineup was his picks. And I will say I love Randy because he got us JT Mellick, he got us Ben Halliday, he got us just killer stuff that we had been trying to get in the lineup for years. That he did with a phone call, which pissed me off and made me love him too. What we did was kind of as a tip of cap to him was we put his Prideful Goat, which is his brand, before he actually exited out of it, which was later last year, in the June lineup. And then a nonprofit. So he had a brother that committed suicide. And so his nonprofit was Live.Stay. So we donated a portion of every box from our June lineup from last year to the Live Stay project. So it was kind of a way for us to kind of put our arms around Randy, let him know we love him, we love his cause, and also, hey, we're going to put your whiskey in the lineup too.
I know what this is.
What's him?
No way, you do not know what sample D is.
Slightly cheated beforehand.
I was going to say, he looked it up.
But, so I have an old college
when
roommate.
you said you know what this is, you're like,
yeah, he really does.
So
he's a cheater.
So I know what this is.
Hold on. So here's the story. I have a roommate that lives in Texas, an old college roommate. And we went down there probably 2-3 years in a row and did this huge whiskey society event down there. And it was year 2, I want to say. One of the tables that was there was local to Texas. And I never had their stuff before. And his business partner actually bought into this distillery. And I tried it there and I went, holy crap. This is some of the best stuff I've ever had. This is my 3rd time having this since then. This is that. It reminds me of that night. That nice. This is Iron Root.
Yep. Was the event in Fort Worth?
Houston.
Oh, okay. So that was a major schlep from Fort Worth. In fact, we started our trip in Fort Worth and ended in Houston, which was fucking dumb because it was like a 5-hour drive from our last stop before that. We didn't really need to see anything in Houston.
Yeah.
Well, we love Houston, but the distillery wise, you know what I mean?
Yeah. They don't really have much distillery wise.
Yeah, there was a few that we reached out to, we wanted to, we didn't get into, and we visited Giant Distillery, which is out there, and they're kind of a rebottler, but so this is out of Denison. They're just like 40 miles north of Fort Worth, the home of Sully Sullenberger from the famous light And I don't even know why I know that. But yeah, we love these guys. These guys were one of the guys that started. He was going to be a lawyer. He passed the bar and everything, and then he, kind of left and ended up going this route. And if you've ever seen The Prestige, you guys seen The Prestige?
Oh,
Yeah.
Christopher
Oh
Nolan
yeah.
movie?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I love
You got to watch it a
any
few times.
Nolan movie that like his brother wrote, because that whole film is about duality, right? Obviously that you have the twin brothers, right? But there's duality built into the whole thing, like with Hugh Jackman, Hugh Jackman, Hugh Jackson. You guys know the
Yeah. Oh
head
yeah.
coach of the Browns that was in, the head coach of the Browns that was in The Prestige. And like his girlfriend dies from drowning, and he dies from drowning later on too, again and again every night. And the same thing, the other guy's wife hangs herself while the other guy gets hung. Like there's duality just laced throughout the whole thing. Although at the end of that movie, I get the chills every time when he goes, every night you don't know if you're the man on the stage or the man in the box. What are you doing? And he looks at him and he goes, it was the looks on their faces. I get the chills every
Oh yeah,
time.
dude. Yeah.
Every time Hugh Jackman does that, I love it. But this guy, like the duality, like he was pursuing a law degree. The duality of Indiana versus Texas for the Prideful Goat, the duality of the brewery that then also became a distillery, the duality of the old Hamer brand, that the old mixed with the new and the finishing. So there was a kind of thematic element to it. And everything that we had at Iron Room was phenomenal. And so this was our second in our smallest batch release, in that it was a blend of 3 barrels. And these are ancient like varietals that like don't even, like, they took 5 ancient varietals that don't even exist. And then so these barrels were crazy experimental, and then they blended the 3 together. And the only thing is, we were not involved in the picking of the barrels or the blending. So we weren't involved in that. So we were kind of going like, please don't fuck it up. We were just crossing our fingers like,
We like you
please don't
guys.
fuck this up. Yeah, come on. Whatever you do. But it's unique. I think this is 128 proof, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, it's up there.
But that smell, that
130,
nose,
130.
yeah,
Yeah.
that nose and that flavor is craft.
Yeah.
But it's unique to Texas. It's
Put like just a touch of water into it. Don't like pour it in there. Just put like a little water in there, and I'm telling you, this one explodes. Like anybody that. So this was kind of a polarizing pick if you think about it, because it's so deep and rich that people go like, it's almost too much, right? And I think if you put just a touch of water into it, I'm like, it kind of solves that problem if you think that's the problem. But we love their story. We love their whiskey. They had this one there that was called Violet, and it was a barrel pick, and what was it called? But it had this deep, rich violet vibe that was going, this violet crumple thing that was going on. And they gave us like a 200 ml of it or 375, that fucking thing, we were trying to bring it home, and it just never made it home. We just kept drinking it. And it was just every night we would have a little bit of that, because every barrel was so unique, wildly unique.
This is really cool what you do.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you draw your clientele in with a blind, but you guys also willingly share not just what it is, but the story. Here's where it came from. Here's the story behind the distillery or the owner or how it got started.
Yeah.
It's such a big part of whiskey that I feel like a lot of people don't realize, or they don't grasp onto. They want the shots. They don't want the sips. And whiskey is so much
and a
about the
marketing
sip.
campaign. We got it.
Yeah.
Right.
We got it.
It's whiskey's so much
you know
about
what
the
the shots
sips
do
and the
with the
talk and the history and what
Yeah.
went into it and how it got started and why does it exist and why does it matter. There's so much of that involved with it that it's almost got lost along the way.
Yeah, we get some people struggle and call us a little bit of a marketing podcast over a whiskey podcast, because we talk a lot about the history of the bottles and the look of the bottle and all of that stuff.
The whole
Because
experience.
the whole experience of it, because the bottle is part of that experience, and the marketing of it is part of that experience, and the story that they tell, whether true or not, and then whether or not it is true or not.
Some of the best stories aren't true.
Yeah,
Look at the Frey Ranch bottle. That emblem is his great grandfather's belt buckle that he wears every day. You know what I mean? And his wife Ashley, designed the whole thing, but it's very much authentic. to their brand and what they're doing. And so there is an interweaving and an overlapping of it. And so it's interesting. Like, so the people that are chasing the bourbons and the Wellers, the blends and the Wellers and stuff like that, I say they're harder for us to convince them that we're doing something cool. I will say when they cross over and they join us, they stay with us and they go, oh yeah, okay, I totally get it now, right? But if they start doing the math and they're like, so I'm paying like 10.50 per, you know, per ounce, and they'll start doing that weird math, and I'm like, look, shipping laws suck. It's not easy. Look, we're not in a basement with a funnel. It's there's a reason that nobody's done this before. It's a very complicated process to get these blind samples made and to do it with these smaller brands that are often, nobody's set up. None of these brands have 50 mLs in existence, right? So there's a whole process, even the bottling, even the washing of the bottles. All of this is a very complicated, in-depth process. And so if it's funny, they'll do the math on that. And I'm like, well, you just spent $15 on Weller SR at the bar. Like, there's nothing fucking special about that. You know what I mean? Like, you get it for $25 in Arizona, and maybe it's $80 in your state, but perception does trump reality. And we always want your perception or our members' perception or our taster's perception to be your taste. Have it all be based on what you like. We don't tell anybody drink it this way. We don't tell anybody what to like. We are curating tasting kits, but what we're really doing, we're curating experiences, right? And we want this to be a diverse lineup. I mean, none of the samples that you guys just had are anything like any of the others. That's what we're shooting.
Yeah. You're not getting into this for like a cheap way to get good bourbon. You know what I mean? You're getting into this for what we just experienced. Yeah. And you're willing to pay extra for that even. You know what I mean? I mean, the fact that you guys are going out of your way to curate this whole setup just adds to that. Like, not only are people not going to be able to get this stuff on their own most of the time, but it's also like the fact that you guys are kind of making these series is you're putting them together where it does flow. You know what I mean? There's so much that's going into this that you're not getting this and you're trying to save money. You're getting this for the experience you're going to have.
Well, and the funny thing is now it's like, now that we have the allocated line that's coming out and these bottles, I do think people really understand the value of the full bottles. That I always say, first of all, if you see something in our lineup that you like, I dare you to see if you can buy this. Like, that Iron Root bottle only exists in this box. We're the only people that have that bottle. You can't get that. Go try to buy the 9-year Prideful Goat. And if you can buy it, I bet you can't get it for what we're selling it for, or anywhere close to it. So, you can get unbelievable. We don't do markups. There's there's a big competitor that we have that they do 3 samples. They're not really blind. Like, they're technically they're blind, but you don't know they're blind. Like, you know what the 3 things are, you just don't know the order that they are. So that's what's called a single blind, right? Ours is a double blind, which means you don't know at any of those stages until you get to the end, or you want to know. And the things in their lineup aren't that special in the sense that they're very accessible. It's not that their whiskey's not good that they're using. It's just when they sell you that full bottle, there's an additional 15 to 20% markup off of normal MSRP. And it's a bottle that you can go get down the street. So I look at that like that's either a lazy or a less sophisticated consumer that is purchasing those full bottles.
Speaking of the marketing, so is this a monkey? Is that what that is?
Technically it's a chimp, but we call him a monkey. Okay. But yeah.
He reminds me of the Gorillas, that band, a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Remember that band? Well, so what's the story behind that?
They just came out with a new album last Friday. I don't know if you know. And it was fucking weird. It didn't sound like anything I've ever heard from them before. So whenever you're creating anything, I would do this with films that I was trying to get made. You either want to make a movie poster or you want to make a sizzle. You want to make a sizzle reel, something that's tangible, something that makes it feel real. So when I went to go pitch the idea to people, I went out and I created a logo. And the idea behind it was going to be, there's the see no evil, the speak no evil, the hear no evil monkey. And so this was going to be a see no evil monkey. And it was going to be kind of him covering up his eyes with his tail. And then he was going to be drinking from it. So that's the idea that started from it. And I went onto this site called 1,000. I think it was called 100 Designs or something. And Vistaprint bought it now. So for $300, you get 100 designs. And it's basically, you get 20 people giving you the same design with different colors. Or you get one person giving you 20 designs of the same color. And you get like 5 of those. And I got one that was very much exactly like, and this is kind of pre-AI, so this was all very much designers probably from India and whatever, just trying to throw a hat in the ring because it's a contest where the winner gets like 60%, second place gets 30, and then like the other top 5 get 10. But whatever, I don't know how it works. And this dude comes in with this steampunk monkey. I'm like, what the fuck is that? That's like a million times better. Like, it really has all the things you want in a brand, and that it was both modern and classic at the same time. And I reached out to him, and he's a self-taught designer from Brazil, and he tried to start a clothing line built around the chimp and the monkey, and he never got it off the ground like 10 years ago. And so when he saw somebody wanted a monkey or chimp, he threw it in there and made some adjustments to it. And yeah, he's my guy. So we're like getting ready. We're doing a rum kit right now that's going to be all rum from. It's not going to be like Virgin Island rum. It's going to be all from the 48 interlocking states. And it's not going to be a subscription. It's just going to be a rum lineup. And I didn't realize how different and interesting rum could be. That really blew my mind. Was going through some of these barrels that were from Texas and Georgia and all this other stuff. So we're adjusting it. The foil is going to be blue. He's going to be in a pirate hat, and there's going to have palm trees behind him. And so we're just doing a different iteration of the box within a different experience. And eventually we're going to do tequila, and we got a restaurant model we're rolling out. So we're doing all the things.
Yeah. So where can people find you guys? If somebody wanted to reach out about Blind Barrels, where do they go?
So you can find us on Instagram at Blind Barrels. You can find them on YouTube, X, any of the Facebook, any of the stuff, X Blind Barrels. You can find us on all those platforms. If you send us a DM, everything will come to me. You can obviously go to blindbarrels.com. What's great is if you do an annual, you're prepaying for the 4 shipments. So you get 4 custom tasting glasses, but you also get a 5th bonus kit that's included in that. So with shipping and everything, you're getting it for $60 a kit. And that's landed, at your door. You can use the code. One that we kind of always have that's evergreen in case someone listens to this later is Whiskey 10. That'll take 10% off anything, whether it's a one-off kit or a quarterly subscription or an annual. And then, if you join us, don't sleep on doing the live tastings. Like we gave away a sample of Pappy 23 a couple of times, the last one. And, we give away a couple rare bottles, when we do the live tasting. So some people just don't show up to those. And the ones that do always come back because they're like, oh my God. And the rule of large numbers, probability you're going to eventually win if you come to enough of them. And then, if we have a special offering that only exists in the box, I would just say, don't wait to buy the bottle. As a member, you'll get a massive discount. We did flat rate shipping. You can get 4 bottles, flat rate shipping at $20. And I'm telling you, the best value we've had bottles that in the secondary then go from, that are $100 that go for $600 a couple of years later. So some people just, get a couple bottles of that, and then they sell it, and that pays for their year. So they can do that too.
Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
We really appreciate it. Yeah. So thank you, and we'll next week we'll talk to you guys again.
Sounds great.
All right. Cheers. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you want more great content and other perks, be sure to support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. We can be reached on our website, whiskeychaserspod.com, with any ideas for the show. Thanks again.